Hi, this is Don. I wanted to give you an update on the Millennium Chronicles project. It is a series of 6 fiction novels about a story covering a span of 1,010 years. This biblical fiction speculates how the facts prophesied in the Bible might play out in the future. I want to show you the first 6 draft of the covers for each of the 6 books and give you a brief rundown of each. Books 1 and 2 are finished, and I'm working on book 3. Okay, here goes. The story begins with the disappearance. Newlyweds Dan and Susie Weston are dozing on a red-eye flight from Europe to America, traveling home from their honeymoon in Vienna, Austria. Their peaceful slumber is rudely interrupted when millions of people all over the world suddenly disappear, including both pilots of their airliner. At night, over the North Atlantic, Dan, a newly minted fighter pilot with the Tulsa Air National Guard, must figure out how to operate this large, complex airplane by himself, finish the flight across the Atlantic Ocean, and bring the plane and its 115 souls safely to land. The book's second half is about the couple's harrowing journey from the East Coast back to their home in Oklahoma through a world gone mad. They struggle through one crisis after another caused by lack of funds, breakdown of law and order, and the rapid rise of outlaw bands of rogue militia and highwaymen taking advantage of hapless travelers. Through all this, the couple must deal with the fact of the disappearance itself. Both raised atheists, the inexplicable event rocks their worldview. Dan is inclined to ignore it, reasoning, there's no explanation, it just happened, press on. But Susie, educated in psychology, can't so easily let it go. Believing all her life there is no God, the only rational explanation is to blame aliens from outer space, a prospect she finds also hard to believe. By the book's end, the couple stagger into their Tulsa home, hoping the worst is behind them. Unfortunately, their hopes are not realized. Book 2, The War, is about the aftermath of what became known as the disappearance, something those affiliated with the Christian church and the Bible call the rapture. The abrupt absence of so many Americans threw the world into chaos. The United States was a critical link in international monetary, communication, and data systems. When overnight the U.S. ceased to function, the world's industrialized nations dependent on those systems were quick to take notice. Soon the United Nations declared the U.S. a failed state. When the U.S. leadership refused to cooperate, a coalition of UN member nations invaded, and the war began. Dan, a fighter pilot, flew combat missions, while Susie worked in one of the Tulsa safe zones established in a rapidly disintegrating community. After the war was lost, the United States territory is partitioned into independent UN protectorates ruled by others: China in the west, some European countries in the east, a consortium of Mideast countries in the southwest, and so forth. Now fugitives from the Western Caliphate government that now ruled the region they were in, Dan and Susie hide for over a year in the Oklahoma forests. This part of the story ends with Dan captured and made a prisoner of war, and Susie free but hiding out with a small group of Christians. Dan and Susie have no idea where the other is or how they could ever get together again. The third book, The New World Order, is about Dan and Susie's experiences in this new country they find themselves a part of. Dan, a prisoner of war, works daily on a farm. Susie, unbeknownst to him, works on the same farm as nanny to the owner's daughter. When Dan, almost at the cost of his life, saves the life of the daughter, it is discovered He and his wife are working on the same farm. Dan thinks it is fine good luck. Susie, now a Christian following Jesus Christ, gives God the credit. A peaceful interlude ensues as Dan and Susie established a home on the farm, and Dan and the owner partner in a crop dusting business. Over time, other followers of Christ form a small church, meeting on the farm. This growing divergence of interest and loyalty, Susie reaching out to Christ and Christians, and Dan stubbornly maintaining his disbelief, stresses the couple's relationship. However, their great love in their new marriage sustains them. All is going well locally, but elsewhere in the world, an Irish-Italian named Connor Doyle is consolidating his international power. His organization, the Global Cooperative, or GC, was initially lauded by most of the UN member nations for effectively solving many problems in the aftermath of the disappearance. Now, however, the GC has begun to take over. The GC has absorbed the militaries of many of the industrialized nations, and through their Gestapo-like GC peace agents, is extending its rule into localities worldwide. As the book ends, the GC dissolves the UN and announces an edict outlawing Christianity and requiring all to accept a loyalty mark tattooed to their foreheads or on their right hands. With this mark, people will be allowed to participate in the GC economy. Those refusing to accept the mark are subject to arrest and trial as traitors to the GC. When the GC peace agents arrive in the Western Caliphate to register everyone, Dan is happy to go along. Susie is not. This part of the story ends with Susie jailed, awaiting trial, facing a probable death penalty, and Dan fervently trying to convince her to just accept the mark and abandon or at least hide her Christian faith. I don't want to give up too much of the story in the fourth book, The Return. It takes place during what the Bible calls the tribulation. Christians are now enemies of the global cooperative, hunted, arrested, and executed. The many lives lost afflict the Christian communities hiding from the GC agents with continuous grief. Even so, the love of God they learn about in the Bible and the detailed prophecies of the coming cataclysmic events as Jesus Christ judges the world give them hope. If they can survive, they'll be there when Christ returns to earth as he promised. Dan, through incredible circumstances, finally surrenders his life to Jesus Christ and becomes part of the teams sent out to attempt rescues of Christians in the clutches of the GC. The details of the prophecies of Daniel and John turn out to be extremely useful to the Christians, forewarning and enabling them to prepare and adjust. At least 3, maybe 4 of the prophesied judgments afflict only the non-Christians. These come at the most opportune times, facilitating rescues of some Christians and escape of others from impending capture. This part of the story culminates in Jesus Christ's return to earth at the head of a vast group of angels and immortals, Christians who had previously died and now possessed their immortal bodies. Jesus Christ's physical return to earth inaugurates a 1,000-year period of ease on earth. This is in the 5th book, the Restoration. The earth itself, ravaged by the tribulation cataclysms, gradually recovers to be better than it has ever been. Jesus rules the earth from Jerusalem, dispensing perfect justice to the people throughout the earth. He accomplishes this through immortals assigned to live and work among the mortal population. The improved living conditions cause the mortals' aging to slow down. Dan, in his late 20s at Christ's return, finds himself years later feeling the same as before. As in Earth's ancient history, Now people live hundreds of years. This book chronicles Dan's many interesting experiences living in this restored paradise, interacting with human beings now made immortal and with much improved goodness and wisdom, and dealing with the conflicts that inevitably arise between followers of Christ and unbelievers, of which there are many. The book ends with rumblings of increasing conflict on an international scale. Some say the devil himself, long absent from the scene, was once again on the prowl, creating increasing havoc. The last book in the Millennium Chronicles series ends with Dan, now a very old man, finding himself abruptly standing on an entirely new earth, watching the massive New Jerusalem city descending to rest upon it. But to get to this happy conclusion, Dan must live through a rise of international rebellion against Christ's central government, leading to a gigantic invasion of Israel's territory. What seems impossible to survive from Dan's perspective turns out to be no problem for Jesus. He employs his divine power to resolve the crisis in a most expeditious manner, after which Dan finds himself standing alone, watching a sight that will give him profound satisfaction forever. So that's it. As I said, the first two books are finished. They'll probably need some professional editing, but otherwise could be published as soon as I find a publisher. The plan is for at least the first two books to become available later this year and the rest the year after. I hope you'll enjoy the story. I'll provide updates about the project on my website, www.dstewart-author.com, and on the social media platforms you see here. On the website, you can sign up for updates on the Millennium Chronicles project, find other short stories like what it's like to make an afterburner takeoff in an F-16, and some what-if short stories about various events recorded in the Bible. You can download the script for a family Christmas play and find other cool things. If you find this project worth your interest, this story about the fascinating new world to come in the millennium, and the incredibly exciting events that lead up to it, I'd appreciate it if you'd share this post with your friends. The greater number of followers there will increase the likelihood of getting a good agent and publisher for the novels. Thank you for watching, and stay tuned.